All right, Shalom, giving all praises honor, and glory to our power, Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shah, Bahasham Rachak, Wadash, to our honors, to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the tabernacles of David, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, wherever you may be, Shalom, and Shalom, Shalom. All right, so we're going to jump back into Daniel, the 8th chapter, and we're going to hit a few points here, but we're probably going to end up doing 2 sessions, um, just because there's enough in this one. You know, it's not going to be entirely too long, just to cover the things that we want to cover. And then we'll go back in another session, you know, Lord willing, to hit on another point, all right? Because all these things were prophetic, which these things happen already, but, you know, some very prophetic things that are said there. So let's start right here where we are in Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. It says, therefore, the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And if you remember, this he-goat was talking about Alexander the Greek, Alexander the Third, and those 4 horns that came up. I'm sorry, not 4 horns. Well, I mean, he does say 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven, but those 4 that came up were generals that were under him, the word of Diadem, Jesus will fall, and so on and so forth. All the history there we talked about, right? So now verse 9 says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great. Now this here is dealing with the Seleucid Empire. And out of the Seleucid Empire, you get one named Antiochus IV Epimanes, right? It says, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land, which we understand and know. Excuse me. The pleasant land is talking about, you know, the area of Judea, right? With Jerusalem being our capital. So it says, and it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. So these hosts of heaven are talking about us Israelites, and we didn't mention. We did mention it. We didn't go to it. Excuse me. A couple of examples here to show you that stars, and not always talking about stars, you know, in heaven, but sometimes it's talking about the Israelites. So here's one, Genesis 37 and 9. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon, which the sun was representing his father, moon his mother, and the 11 stars representing his 11 brothers, because this is talking about Joseph, all right? So the 10 brothers before him, and the last brother in the line was the 12th son, which was Benjamin. So Joseph was son number 11. So it's saying 11, all right, stars, because it's talking about his 11 other brothers, right? But it goes to show you the stars and the brothers, same thing, right? So it says, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Now, the other example here is right down here in the book of Revelation, verse 12. It says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman, I'm sorry, not verse 12, but chapter 12, all right? A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, right? Which is sun and moon, in this case, represent knowledge and wisdom. Sun, knowledge, moon, wisdom. It says, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. This time it's talking about 12 because it's talking about all the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so these 12 stars are representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So, and we know the Messiah was out of the head tribe, which is the tribe of Judah. So that's what that's going into. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head, and so on and so forth. Right? So we know that's dealing with the empire of the Edomites, right? And at this particular time, it was the Herodians, right? Because the Roman Empire, those were Edomites, those were the ones in power. The Herodians were set up as kings over the province of Judea. So those Herods, they were also Edomites, but okay. But these there was a particular Herod, right, that sought to kill the baby Yahushua, which I think you could read about that. I believe that's the one in Matthew chapter 2. You can read about that in Matthew chapter 2. All right. And then it goes on to say, and his tail drew the third part of the stars. And here's again, here's two in the same chapter. Third part of the stars. So the third part of the stars are dealing with the southern kingdom, because the northern kingdom went into the Syrian captivity. Then they had their history over here in the west. The southern kingdom being Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. That's the third part of the stars. All right. So it says, so basically dealing with the southern kingdom. All right, so-called Negroes, West Indians, and Haitians. So it says, and it tells you the third part of the stars of heaven, and they cast them to the earth. So you might think it sounds like what churches tell you is a red dragon. He came from hell, the pits of hell, and he threw the stars down. All right, he came from planet Nibiru. Some crazy mess, right? No. All right, it's talking about the empire of the Edomites, in particular the Herodians. Right, and these stars are talking about Israelites, and they cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And that's what we just talked about, the history of Matthew chapter 2. All right? Because Yahushua was obviously of the nation of Israel. And amongst the nation of Israel, he was from the head tribe, the tribe of Judah, because he was a Judite. All right? So with that little basic understanding there, we're going back. So it says, verse 10 says, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. So there you go. So now we understand what it's talking about here. Verse 11 says, yeah, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground in a practice and prosper. So this is I don't know, the blue letter's been acting funny. I've been trying to pull it for the last 5 minutes, but we don't need it anyways. I wanted to bring it up, but it's okay. There's something going on with the blue letter right now. At least mine. I don't know if everybody else is experiencing, but mine's is acting jacked up. So yeah, I was going to the right place. So if you go over here after what we just read there, first, actually, what am I doing? Right, First Maccabees chapter 1, okay, and verse 20. All right, so it says, and after that Antiochus has smitten Egypt. Right, this is Antiochus' fourth Epimanes. Right, so after that Antiochus has smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. All right, so it says, and entered proudly, right, like a devil would do. Right, entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof. So before he even did anything, before he took anything out, the fact that a heathen walked inside of the temple, it was already profane. But then he took it way further, right? So, which, as we just read some of that, all right, him uh uh taking all these treasures and things, these gold vessels, all these different things, right? So verse 22 says, and the table of the shewbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, which is the curtain, right? Separating the holy of holies. It says, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all like it, all which he pulled off. It says he took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found, because of course we would have a treasury, right? A lot of those vessels were made of gold, silver, whatever, different things, right? But then you would just have, a treasury of gold that was accumulated. Maybe it was given, or as a free will offering, whatever the case may be, right? So it says, and when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly, which is back into Syria. Okay, so he went back home, right? And then it says what? It says, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly, all right? Because he profaned the temple. He erected a statue of, who was it? Zeus. He sprinkled pig's blood on the altar, try to force the Israelites to drink pig's blood, okay? And this devil is not done yet, okay? Let's see where I want to go from here. I want to keep going. As a matter of fact, let's um I'm thinking just like you, just bear with me. Trying to make sure I get everything in. Let's jump down to 29 and get a few more, and then we'll have to bounce back again. So it says, and after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came up to Jerusalem with the great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. All right, like a devil would do, right? For when they had given him credence, meaning um basically they gave their trust to him, right? Um, when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city. All right, is that not what Esau does best? Okay, make a treaty, make a pact, make a friend, or whatever the case may be, and then he stabs him right in the back. He fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. It says, and when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. All right. So I'm gonna stop right there and we go back over here. Okay. So if we keep reading back in Daniel in verse 13. So we read that, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and he cast down the truth to the ground and practiced and prospered. So he basically profaned the temple, stopped all those things because we couldn't sacrifice. Him being in the temple was already profane, right? I'm sorry, not profane, but the temple was already violated. Which I mean, profane means outside the temple, but it was violated. All right. So then him going further and doing everything else that he did. All right. So yeah, we can no longer sacrifice. So verse 13 says, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, right? Going into what? Our temple, in our temple worship, right? And the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden down underfoot. And he said unto me, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that's pretty much going into like 6 years, maybe around 3 or 4 months. Okay, definitely over 6 years. All right. So this is the time period from what we just read in Maccabees. All right, the desolation of the temple. Okay, from there all the way up to the rededication of the temple, which you can read about in First Maccabees chapter 4. Maybe because we don't really have to read the whole chapter. Maybe starting like around verse 36 and read that on down to the end, right? So from that time it was desecrated until the time it was rededicated. Okay, that was a little over 6 years. All right, that was a 6 year window. Okay, and we know it's valid because going into that Hanukkah, I don't want to. Well, I'm in Daniel, so I can jump back. What was verse 14? So let me see here. I know it's in John. Yep. So yep, right here. John 10:22, and it was at Jerusalem the feast of the dedication, and it was winter, and Yahushua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So, for those of you that think the Apocrypha is not valid, or whatever the case may be, or you believe what you want to believe, well, here's Yahushua, whom the world falsely and ignorantly calls Jesus the Christ. All right, reverencing a high holy day that was created in the Maccabean period. All right, before his time, as a rededication of the temple that was sacked. Okay, so that became a holy day. All right, Hanukkah, and Yahushua reverenced that day. All right, so you can't say that he was going off, and there's only one place where that's mentioned, which is here, John 10:22-23, and the actual holiday is in First Maccabees chapter 4. right? So we know the Apocrypha is valid, even without that little bit of evidence. But we know because there's other things you can point out, but it's valid, man. Okay. So if we go back here, verse 14 says, "And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." So over 6 years, right? Um, Continue reading on. It says, "And it came to pass when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me the appearance of a man." Oh, and to mention, all right, also, our Lord spoke about it. All right, I believe it's both Luke 21 as well as Matthew 24. Okay, Yahushua warned about this. He prophesied. All right, he prophesied about 70 AD coming. All right, that time we're living in now. And he also prophesied back then about this time period. Let me jump down and see if I can find it here. I think I passed it. Yeah, I definitely passed it. Go back up here. Okay. I didn't mean to click it, but that's it right there. I didn't mean to click that though. So yeah. So it says Matthew 15. Matthew 24:15. "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand." So the Lord was warning those back then. All right. Actually, we'll just say he's prophesying because maybe some of those people weren't even alive around that time when it happened. Right? Probably not. But the Lord was prophesying about a future event, which at this point has already passed. But back then, he was prophesying about the future event, which was the same event that Daniel prophesied about. All right, Daniel recorded that history from the visions that was given to him. See, and so Yahushua also prophesied about the same desolation. Now he didn't mention Antiochus or nothing like that. Who was going to be in power? Who was doing this? Who was doing that? He was just letting them know. All right, this is going to happen. All right. So it says, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains." All right. Now this is going into something else. All right. Which the something else is 70 AD. All right. But I just wanted to read that scripture there. All right. To make that point. So let me see here. Back down to where were we? All right. So yeah. It says, yeah, we read that. It says, "And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision." Right? So it says, "So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be division. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be." Now, this end is not talking about the end that we're in, right? That was just talking about that particular time period, right? Because these things have already transpired as well as far as prophecy goes. It says, "The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia," which we already talked about, right? In the actual breakdown of the chapter. Verse 21 says, "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia," which is talking about Alexander the Third, Alexander the Greek, whatever you want to call him, right? Historians have him as Alexander the Great, but whatever. It says, "And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." That's what we're talking about, Alexander, right? So verse 22 says, Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." That's what we already mentioned. Alexander, after that 12 years, the Lord took him out by some kind of disease, and then the war of Diadoches, and eventually his four generals split the territory. The main two are Ptolemy, that took over Egypt, and the Seleucid Empire, all right, hailing from Syria, right? And from that Seleucid Empire, you get Antiochus Fourth Epimenides, who we are talking about slightly. All right. So it says, verse 23 says, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. All right, let's talk about Antiochus Fourth Epimenides. All right. So, he was a very, devious man. He was very cunning. All right. Hey, we just read how he came, with peaceable words, and then, it was all deceit, right? Backstab. So he was a very wise man, but of course was in doing evil, right? So it says, yeah, it says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Right? And so I want to go back here to First Maccabees, right? And I'm gonna jump down here to 36. So it says, for it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary and an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. See? It says, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, which were obviously your Greeks, Edomites, right? And became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her, which also could include other heathen nations, because, it's possible, they had a certain territory, but I mean, you get the point. It was strange children to talk about those that are not of Israelite descent. Okay, it says her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt, and as had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Right. So as much as glory, the temple and everything was, and how things were. All right, it was double that, in dishonor. Okay. It says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king, which, you know, ultimately, when you go back up to the top of the chapter, we had wicked Israelites who forsook the Holy Covenant and wanted to join up with the heathens, all right? But this is a whole decree right here. So it says, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king, right? So it says all the heathen, all right, agreed, not Israelites. It says, yeah, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. That's what we just mentioned at the top, more so at the top of this chapter, right? Those that forsook the holy covenant. So you had Israelites that fell away to this man, his policies or whatever you want to say, but then you also had Israelites who were faithful believers who stuck to the covenant. And those are the ones that begin, with Mattathias and down at Judas and his brethren, all right, that has one in dynasty, all right. Those are the ones that led up to those of the circumcision of Judea, because they fought to do what? Keep the ways, the customs, the laws, and things of the nature, right? So it says, verse 44 says, for the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. And it's strange because those are not the ways of the Lord. Okay. And forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days. So you have wicked Israelites that were going along with this, right? And pollute the sanctuary and holy people. You see, set up altars and groves, right? Because altars just, uh, uh, you know, I don't want to say a stage, but you know, it's made out of basically stones, all right? But a grove is the same altar made out of stones, but with now trees, surrounding around it, right? So it says, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beast. See? It says that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. So you understand why the Jews of Judea was so pissed off at those the uncircumcision, the Gentile Israelites. All right, because they understood the history, man. right? The history was all there. They understood the history. They hated them, with great anger, okay, because of this history here, man. What they did, or their foreparents or grandparents or whatever did, because they were actually the descendants. Okay, but you get my point though, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised. Hey, Timothy, all right, his father, he was calling himself a Greek, all right, because of the history behind that. All right, we couldn't call ourselves a Jew; we had to call ourselves a Greek, all right. So his father, who was falling away to those things, was one that didn't circumcise Timothy, all right. So just following the customs of the heathens, which is not circumcising the male child, which we know the Israelites are supposed to do. It says, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, which could have been a number of things, right? To the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. In the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. You see that? Many people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law. Not everyone, just everyone who forsook the law, the covenant, and so on and so forth, right? And so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. So those that were like, nah, man, we're gonna stick to the fear of the Lord. We're gonna do what's right in the sight of the Lord. Those Israelites were persecuted. See, I want to get something else, but not sure I want to grab it now because I'm thinking maybe, yeah, we'll do that in another session. Because I want to finish this off. Oh, actually, I want to get this one back up. So, in verse 24 again, it says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Okay? And, he was killing men, women, children, babies. He didn't care, man. Okay? No remorse. They had to flee and hide wherever they could, amongst other heathens. All right? Also amongst other, or not other heathens, because we're not heathens, but you get what I meant. Amongst heathens, amongst other Israelites, wherever they could go. All right? They would hide out. Okay? So it says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, which is talking about his pride, right? It says, and by peace shall destroy many, which we read, remember? He came with deceit. He came with peaceable words, and they gave him credence, right? So it says, he shall also stand. It says, he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Yeah, all that rebelliousness, we got to get this. That led up to a horrible death. And I'm going to read all of it. We're just going to get some of it here. Um, in the book of second. Let me see here. 1 second. It's actually in the first Maccabees as well, but second Maccabees chapter 9 really gives you that. Gives you what you're looking for. Okay, so yeah, it says he's gonna stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken. I think it says without hand, something like that. All right, so when you're going over there to Second Maccabees chapter 9, I want to see here because I know I got it marked here because I got all my stuff, so we can know exactly. So we can just get right to the nitty gritty. Yep, that's what I want. So I'm going to read just these few verses. So you can read the whole chapter. Is just nuts. Okay, Lord did him super dirty, which he deserved. All right. But we're going to start here at Second Edges. I'm sorry, not Second Edges. Second Maccabees chapter 9, verse 5. We're just going to read down to verse 12. So it says, but the Lord Almighty, the power of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. Or as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless, right? In other words, there was no remedy. Okay. It's kind of a tongue twister right there. Came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. The Lord just cooked this dude up from the inside out, right? So it says, and this was a slow death, right? And that most justly, for you see, most justly, I just said, right? Well deserved, and most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, all right, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews. All right, yeah, the Lord jacked his ass up and he tried to take out his anger on us, twofold, right? But okay, let's keep reading. It says, and commanding to haste the journey, but it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained, right? So he was already hurting. So, if you're hurting like that and you fall on the ground, yeah, you're going to be, it's going to, like you get hit in the stomach and the wind is just knocked out of you. Or for men, you get hit in the gonads and everything just kind of stops. Yeah, so he's feeling this kind of pain, man. It says, and thus he had a little aforethought he might command the waves of the sea. So proud he is. Listen to this guy, man, thinking he's God or something, right? But that's what happened often, especially with those Roman uh, um, emperors, right? They would have this term called divus, divus, where they would declare themselves and their families, like deities or kind of like gods or whatever, right? So it says, and thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea. So proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weighed the high mountains in the balance, was now cast on the ground. Yeah, all that pride was cast down, man, and carried in. And what the scripture say? Um, he that exalted himself shall be abased, right? So it's then carried in horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of the Most High, so that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man. And whilst he lived in sorrow, so he probably had maggots crawling in and out of him, flesh falling off. Dude stink like all hell, right? His flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. And the man, and the man that thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. So just the walking dead, the living, rotten flesh, worms and everything, just disgusting, right? And the Lord really jacked his ass up. Okay, much deserved. Here, therefore, being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride. Oh, hold on now, and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of the Most High, his pain increasing every moment. This is where he started to get humbled down. Then he started to try to do nice things to make up for all the wicked evilness he did to the Israelites. And then, furthermore, he wanted to convert. Not gonna work, my man. And it was last verse. We get this last verse. And when he himself could not abide his own smell, he said these words: It is meet to be subject unto the Most High, and that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself if he were God. All right. So, and that's the same thing that happened to Nebuchadnezzar II, man. Lord jacked him up, which he gave him a whole entire year's warning, a year's notice. He told him what he had to tell him. A year passed by, and he forgot all about it. And as soon as he spoke, well, while he was speaking, the Lord sent him out there, all right, like an animal, all right, to hide that pride and dumb that pride down, right? Take it out of him, see? Because it's the Most High that ruled in the kingdom of man, as the scripture has said, see? So we can go back from there. I'm just gonna read that portion. Um, where were we? I think we're in here. Yep. So it says after, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand, which we just read about. It's both in First Maccabees and Second Maccabees, but the Second Maccabees is a gut puncher. Verse 26 says, "In the vision, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days," because that was a time period that was in the future, but it was actually also, before, actually long before these latter times now. Because remember, even Yahushua prophesied about it, right? So there was a long ways in the future. See, so it says, and I Daniel fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward, I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. All right. So yeah, so even the vision was actually broken down to Daniel, but you have to understand he was seeing the future, things that didn't exist. All right, events that he had no idea what the heck was going on. Okay, so it messed him up, man. All right. So yeah, that was the end of that little session. You don't want to go into those things. Just to go into that chapter, as I said before. Just getting the basic understanding of a chapter, then building on layers. And this particular chapter, I wanted to come back because it was an extra layer that I was going to give you. Because you study on your own, but that was an extra layer there. But we got one more layer that we're going to lay on top of that one, and we'll be done with that chapter. But it's very important things to understand. But as for now, Lord willing, you edify to next time. I'm going to say shalom.